So Bernie Sanders came out and was basically blaming the media or giving them a lot of credit for him losing the Democratic primary to Joe Biden. And obviously there definitely is some truth to that. The corporate media was always going to be against Bernie Sanders because he was a direct threat to the corporations that own and control them. I believe it's something like the six media companies control over 90% of the TV stations, radio stations in the country, and they're owned by things like Comcast and CBS and all of those huge mammoth corporations that obviously don't want to get a president elected who would be a threat to their profit margins and the profit margins of the people who advertise on those networks, like the health insurance industry, the pharmaceutical companies, the military industrial complex, etc. And I mean, CNN at one point even had a graphic up on one of their guests. It was, can Bernie Sanders and the coronavirus be defeated? So obviously there's definitely some truth to what Bernie Sanders is saying, because the media was always out to get him. They were trying to make that big story up about him saying good things about Castro's education program and the literacy program there. But Bernie and his team tried to play it both ways in a sense. There was a story out about how his team tried to contact the head of MSNBC. I believe their name is Phil Griffin, to get more positive coverage for Bernie and his campaign. It's like, no, that's not the strategy you want to use, Bernie and company. What you actually wanted to do, because most, good chunk of people actually distrust the media because they see how corrupt it is and how they're willing to say and do anything, even if it means lies and straight up propaganda, to prop up the neoliberal corporate establishment that hurts working people and disproportionately obviously vulnerable and marginalized populations as well. What he really should have done is go scorched earth on the media like Donald Trump did. Bernie in his interviews was way too conciliatory. I mean, he had that interview not too long ago before he dropped out with Whoopi Goldberg of The View, and Whoopi was really just pestering him with these really ridiculous and stupid questions and all of these things, and Bernie was just being super polite and answering the same questions over and over, and Whoopi kept talking over him and all these things, but he wasn't willing to go scorched earth like Donald Trump was. He wasn't willing to burn the whole fucking thing down in order to get elected, or in order to help the cause and the movement that he was basically the figurehead of. So I do definitely think there's some truth to the media being part of why he wasn't the nominee, but let's face it, he was the front runner up until Super Tuesday and Bloody Monday, as Kyle Kulinski called it, where all of the other candidates dropped out at the behest of Barack Obama. They all coalesced behind Joe Biden. Bernie wasn't willing to change the campaign's strategy at all, vis-a-vis him not wanting to go after Joe Biden. He wasn't willing to attack him on the issues at all because he considers Joe Biden his friend. Bernie it doesn't fucking matter, for God's sakes. You're running for president. We have 68,000 people a year dying, at least. It's going to be more now because of this coronavirus pandemic, dying because they don't have health care. We have 40% of the population, it's going to be a lot higher now because of the pandemic again, that can't afford a $400 emergency expense. And you're worried about offending Joe Biden's sensibilities? Fuck off with that shit. That is horribly weak. So again, yes, the media did play a part in it, but Bernie's inability to change the strategy and go after and attack Joe Biden on the issues is also one of the reasons for that. And unfortunately, Bernie is just a weak candidate in that perspective. He wasn't willing to say or do the things that would have actually increased his chances of beating Biden and becoming the Democratic nominee, something that was hugely important. And now we have Biden going up against Trump. And as others have pointed out, it's, probably a toss-up at this point between Trump and Biden, simply due to the fact of the coronavirus and how our economy is tanking. We've lost 22 million jobs in the last 4 weeks have been lost. Unfortunately, due to those negative consequences that, Biden's chances of winning have increased. And also needs to be pointed out, Bernie, you did yourselves no fucking favors every time you went out there and said you thought Joe Biden could defeat Donald Trump, especially after Joe Biden was the presumptive nominee, more or less. You needed to be hammering away at the case of why you were the only candidate who could defeat Donald Trump. Iraq War, NAFTA, Biden's gonna struggle hugely in the Rust Belt, NAFTA, PNTR, wanting to cut Social Security, corruption, the crime bill, the bankruptcy bill, the very serious and obvious cognitive decline, not supporting Medicare for all during a pandemic, all of these things. I mean, that's not a electable candidate, Bernie, and unfortunately you were too worried about keeping Joe Biden as your friend because he's been nice to you and Jane, your wife. And I mean, obviously it's, hugely disappointing that Bernie was more concerned about keeping Joe Biden as his friend or being in Biden's good graces than to actually mount a campaign that was actually, focused on winning, focused on really becoming the nominee and not just fucking placating the Democratic establishment and telling his followers that if they don't support or vote for Joe Biden after Biden has made no concessions, no substantive policy concessions whatsoever. He proposed lowering the Medicare eligibility age to 60. Hillary was offering to lower it to 50 in 2016, for fuck's sake. I mean, it kind of almost seems a little bit like how Hillary was trying to blame, Russia and anybody else, Bernie's team, the Green Party, Jill Stein, anybody but herself, and wasn't willing to take any type of responsibility for why she lost in 2016 against a, lunatic game show host in Donald Trump. So Bernie needs to do a little bit of that self-reflection and realize that some of the problem, unfortunately, lies with him and his inability to go after and really run a campaign that was aimed at winning and not just one that was, just kind of tiptoeing around the edges and not really doing what it needed to be done to actually fucking win. I mean, so yes, corporate media is the corporate media. You're always going to get that same type of treatment from them, but you really should have went scorched earth on them, called them out on their bullshit more than you did. You should also obviously called out Biden more on his bullshit. You should have listened to your people, your advisors on your campaign who correctly wanted you to go after Biden, hammer away on him, especially on the issue of electability, because Fortunately, that's what a lot of Democratic voters were voted on. They weren't voting on policy. And, you know, he should have been making, with that knowledge in mind, he should have obviously been making the case that he was electability candidate. And he didn't, and that's nobody's fault but his own. I would love to hear your thoughts. Peace. Much love.